time, I'd like to call this Joint Planning and Zoning Commission meeting to order. Have the acceptance of the April 13th, 2011 proposed agenda.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Nance,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Kluwat to accept the proposed agenda. Is there any discussion or opposition? Motion passes. Time roll call. Let the record show all commissioners are present with the exception of Mr. Julio Dumas. Item 4, acceptance of the minutes of the March 9th, 2011 Joint Planning and Zoning Commission meeting.
So moved to accept.
Have a motion by Bob Nance to
Second.
approve, seconded by Steve Barrow. Is there any opposition or discussion? Motion passes. Public hearing for recommendation of the following small planned unit development plan. This should say recommendation of approval or denial to the parish council. Go ahead and point out to the commission that we will be voting twice on this, once as a planning commission and once as a zoning commission. So the engineer developer's here to present this item. Oh, shoot. Hang on a second, guys. I just skipped something. I had our initial public comment period. Is there anyone wishing to address the commission at this time? If so, please come up, sign in. You'll get your 3 minutes to address the commission on any item. No one wishing to address the commission. Okay. Gentlemen, if you'd like to make your presentation now. I apologize. I just happened to skip that item, and I don't want legal counsel to get mad at me. So.
My name is Taylor Gravois. I'm representing Piazza Development, and we are here tonight to ask for approval of the small plan unit development, Highway 73 Commercial Park.
Okay. Like to tell us a little bit about your proposal?
We are proposing to develop approximately 4.2 acres. It is going to be 2 office buildings, medical office in the front, and in the rear, phase 2, we're proposing some future mini warehouse storages. It's a pretty straightforward development, servicing the medical office community and many storage needs. If you guys have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Comments or questions from commissioners? Yes, Norm?
I noticed in there that you, under watershed, that you listed the drainage, DOTD drainage map allows 1.2 CFS, and your plan calls for 1.87. Now, even though that is such a small amount, has anyone gotten any clearance from DOTD on that issue?
We have not applied for a connection permit to that DOTD right away at this time. To my knowledge, that project has not been let and under construction yet. So what would happen is kind of like the chicken and egg. We may actually go in prior to DOTD building that road and drain. So we have not actually made an application to connect to that yet because it doesn't exist.
Any other comments or questions from commissioners? Mr. Clark?
Visit your site, and this is going to be, the Office 1 and Office 2 is going to be a brick type building looking like a home, and it's going to be an office building. And in the back, you're going to put metal buildings, metal storage units back there. When Mr. Sadler and I visited the site, and Mr. Nance and I visited the site, we noticed it's all residential homes around that area. We noticed that there's quite an expensive development of townhouses right up to the fence of where you propose your project, and on the other side is residents, and then across the street is all residents. Can you talk about that a little bit with putting storage units amongst all these residents, and people can be accessing them at nighttime and everything?
Well, as far as accessing the property, I'd like to address first the aesthetics of it, which I think we've addressed quite well. These buildings are not just metal. If you make notes to the drawings, we put metal facades in areas that were visible from the roads or from those areas to show something that would be consistent with what would fit behind a $1 million doctor's buildings. The doctors that are actually going to build these first two buildings actually own the whole property. So they're very concerned about having something that would be consistent with what they're investing in the front. We have talked to the neighbors, and the neighbors that you're referring to, the condos or the townhouses that would be on the, I guess it would be the south side of the property, there's only 2 windows that actually face that whole project from that side. There's a fence, and all the visibility from those condos faces away from this property. So in those areas where there's visibility, where you would actually see these buildings, we've made special attention, and some of the drawings show the facades that would be very consistent with something that would not look like what I would call a typical storage. These are designed to be for larger storage facilities like RVs or boats. As areas in this part of the parish, your subdivisions don't allow you to put a boat in your driveway or whatever. People are needing access to larger storage. So these are geared a little bit towards larger RVs and boats, where there will be more than likely not being accessed throughout all times of day or night. We don't envision high-density use of this at all. I mean, there's obviously going to be access availability, but it's not intended to be a business park, per se, where you'd see people in and out throughout all times of day or night.
Any other comments or questions from commissioners? Mr. Barrow.
Mr. Chairman, just for point of clarification, the zoning is currently MU2, correct? Okay. So there may be residents around here, but this particular piece of land is already zoned MU2. So certain things could be built beside these other houses regardless.
MU2 is more professional type commercial.
All right.
Mr. Chairman,
I don't, go ahead, Mr. Dahl.
on page 4 of your little book, assuming that I'm interpreting your symbols correctly, in the labeling, it looks like you're putting a row of, I don't know, I didn't count them, there's some red maple trees along the south property line, which runs in an east to west direction. But then I don't show that shown elsewhere. And in one of the development things here, it says the green space will be maintained privately. What assurances do we have and that those trees are going to remain? In other words, I see them on the drawing, but in 6 months from now, if nobody takes care of those trees, they could well die. So my question to you is, what assurances can you offer this commission that those green spaces and trees and whatnot, all the shrubbery that you're proposing, is going to be there for some years to come?
Well, you know, to be consistent with, again, the development, since this project is owned by the doctors that will be building the buildings in the front, they're making a substantial investment, and their desire would be to continue to maintain the property up to the standards of that investment, not just as a typical mini warehouse. I mean, this phase 2 is what is planned currently today. You know, the goal would be, or the goal could have been, to build office buildings throughout the whole area. Right now, the economy is not supporting that in this phasing as we've looked at it. It just doesn't support that. But that could or would potentially be an option down the road. At this point in time, this is what we proposed for this project. So, you know, I speak clearly as the developer that the intention would be to maintain it to the standards of the buildings and the investments that are being made in the beginning of the property, and consistent with what you've seen along that area.
Well, specifically what I've heard you say is intentions, but I'd like to get staff's comments if I could, please.
That very issue is something that would be addressed in the developer's agreement. When that came back to you, it would put all of the standards that are in this packet into an ordinance form, and they'd be held to that with the force of law.
Well, I asked that question specifically I was going to lead up to a staff comment. So this is in the form of a written binding contract?
Yes, sir. Between
And how
that
long does that
developer,
contract would that hold?
it carries with the land for 9 years after it's executed.
And
Or
that's-
if the project gets developed, it will carry with the project. I mean, if their project went away and somebody else bought it, the developer's agreement that's executed with that property carries with the land for 9 years. If they develop the property, it's a law and it's in place. It has to be followed. So the language would be put into the document that says landscaping shall be installed per these specifications. Landscape shall be maintained for a period of, 20 years. We can put the language in there that protects the community and ensures that that will be put in place. And if we go and somebody calls and says, hey, they lost 5 maples, they need to replace them, we go out and we check and say, yeah, they need to replace these maple trees, or we take them to court.
Well, I specifically asked that question to get this introduced into the proceedings tonight, that this is a formal and binding contract that is enforceable by the parish. Thank you.
Well, while that's correct, it's also potentially incorrect, because since this goes to the parish council for a vote, they can undo everything that we do here tonight. They can choose to ignore everything that we,
No. I think you missed my point. I'm saying that the ordinance here is an enforceable ordinance by the parish. Granted, the parish council can either take our recommendations or not. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about that this ordinance, the small planned unit development ordinance, is actually a binding contract that is enforceable by the parish. That was my point.
comments or questions from commissioners? If there's no further comments or questions from commissioners, we'll open up the public hearing on this. Anyone wishing to come up and address the commission, please sign in. There's a sign-in sheet by Mr. Compton's seat.
Thank you. I just have one comment. This is being recommended as a SPUD, Small Planned Unit Development. We'll be speaking about PUDs and SPUDs and TNDs at the next meeting. This is mixed use too, is that correct? The mixture of residential and commercial is allowed in mixed use too. This property can be developed without being a SPUD. A developmental agreement can be made with the developer and the builder without it being a SPUD. The problem that I have with SPUDs and PUDs and these other projects is that the negotiations are flexible and are made with the planning director and his staff away from the public eye. And the other residents in the area don't really have a say in what happens. And I think that needs to change. So this property can be developed. It doesn't have to be a SPUD, and I think that's important for the public and the commission to take note. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Denise Terrio. The problem I have with it is it's 2 doctor's offices. According to what's written, it's only 29 places for parking, at which point there is a pond on this piece of property also. How much of that takes up? How much is that going to be part of the private maintenance? Who's going to be responsible for all of those different places that people are supposed to be able to park when they go to those mini storage warehouses? If it's going to be to the public, what keeps anybody and everybody from going back there? With only 29 parking places and 2 different office buildings in there, it's kind of limited as to how many doctors can be in there for such a piece of property. My recommendation is that it should not be approved. So I'd like it to go on the record as being opposed to it as being a SPUD. If it's mixed to commercial, it should be allowed to be built under commercial regulations. The 40 maple trees at some point is going to start out little. But then there are going to be great big maple trees, and the parish is going to have to deal with when do they come down, before or after they come down on those buildings. Thank you.
Thank you. That's all we had was 2 people? Okay. Public comment period's closed on this. Gentlemen, you have any further comments to make to the commission?
I would just like to comment that the 40 maples came about when the staff reviewed it, and they requested that we put the maples in. I think it's a good recommendation. It helps soften that view from these Dutchtown townhouses. And there's also an existing 6-foot board fence in between the proposed development and Dutchtown cottages. And we are proposing to continue that wood fence around the development, all in an effort to help soften the view with the existing neighborhood and make sure that the character of this development is consistent. We're certainly not opposed to looking at a different tree type. That would not be problematic, but those were requested by staff, and we want to put them in to help soften that view and buffer.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Kluwat?
The other buildings 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, are they going to be mini warehouses too? Or warehouses, I should say?
Yes.
And the 2 in the back, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 are going to all be warehouses? That's
Yes.
2 in the back and the 3 in the center.
Yes, everything behind the doctor's building is proposed as warehouses.
Are there going to be any humidity control, or are they going to just be all open warehouses?
At this point, there's no plan for humidity control. They're going to be used for ambient storage for RVs and items of such.
And I noticed they're going to be, some of them are going to be as much as 18 feet tall or better.
Yes, sir. To accommodate RVs and some of those items, you need at least 12 to 14 foot height indoors just to get into them.
And the wings 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 are going to all be warehouse, large warehouses as also?
Yes, envision those would be drive-throughs for ability to drive through with RVs or large boats to be able to get in.
Totally enclosed, not just open sheds?
Yes, enclosed. The details of the elevations are in one of these sketches that shows the different elevations, and we've highlighted the elevations for each area shown it, but they basically will either have metal or brick or doors, depending on which elevation it is.
So in other words, if you was living in one of the townhouses and you was to look out the window, you would see the back of metal buildings, according to your layout?
Well, fence, you'd see a fence low and then maple trees, and then you could see the metal building, yes. But I commented earlier that there's 2 windows on that side of the whole commons. One of them at the front, which is approximately at the line that you see between Phase 1 and 2. So that person, if they looked out that one window, would look at the office buildings. The other one's at the really near, almost far back, almost by Building 1 in the back by the pond. So there's only 2 windows there, and there's 45 units. So that they're all phased, and they're oriented away from this already, so well in advance of this development, so there
And
really
what
isn't.
about noise?
Sir?
Noise, what about noise? In other words, if you're having a function there, say they're in their back courtyard and they're having a function on a Sunday evening, and next thing, you have people going in and out of the warehouses with their boats and their RVs or whatever.
Again, the way we've oriented the actual facade, the rear of that actually creates a barrier. So all of the activity was within an enclosed area and behind a fence. You also, just to orient back to the west, is Interstate 10, which is probably going to create a tremendous amount more noise than. So their common area and green space is back by the interstate. So probably, not to say there couldn't be noise, but I don't think the noise, the way these buildings are designed, is going to catch much noise coming from the inside of those courtyards where the boats or RVs would be, because they've got a building insulating them from, and the back of the buildings of the commons also. So,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other comments or questions from commissioners?
Well, I have
Mr.
one.
Dalton?
Obviously, in your thing here. It says you're going to build the doctor's offices first. That's a fairly innocuous use, though I do have some concerns about the limited number of parking spaces, because you've got staff for the doctors. That's going to be, and each doctor's probably going to have 4 or 5 people staff at a minimum. And you've got patients, so I'm really concerned that there's enough parking. The other thing that concerns me, that I think it concerns others, but I won't speak for them. It says the second phase, the mini warehouse storage will be built at a later date. Well, if that doesn't happen, for whatever reason, the property changes hands between one owner and another for whatever reason, I have concerns as to what could be built there at this point in time if this was to go forward with a recommendation for approval. I don't know, you know the answer to that, but those are some of my concerns, because if this property changes hands, the way I would see it, pretty much all bets are off and it's starting back from square one. So I would like possibly staff to address that contingency. What would happen?
If this plan moves through the process and gets approved by council, it doesn't matter who the owner is for the next 3 years. If they want to develop this property, it's going to look like what you approve.
And after that three-year period?
If they haven't constructed anything, the PUD would expire, and we would petition that the council put the zoning back to what it was prior to the rezone. If they have constructed the project, the vesting would be improved, the PUD zoning would stay, but whoever would want to develop that back half would have to come back for a reapproval of the development within the SPUD zoning. I mean, nothing would happen without coming through the commission and the council for ultimate approval.
Just wanted to clear that up. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman? What about the exit, entrance and exit is going to be passing right there where they're going to have people coming in to the doctor's office or whatever? In other words, let's just say you have a large RV or a nice-sized truck with a pretty good-sized boat that's going to store. And then I notice you got 43 feet and then 42 feet in between them. Is that enough room for all that to be maneuver around there to get into them sheds, to get in them storage?
It actually is actually more than normally you would design. These things are usually crammed fairly tight. Most mini warehouses, people want to just jam them. These are actually very spacious between the facilities to access large boats and.
And the doctors have no problem with that one entrance going on to Highway 73 with the, let's just say, traffic during our office hours, and they want to, in other words, you and I got a boat there and we want to go get it and we're going to make a lot of noise. They have no problem with that?
No, it's not.
Obviously, they don't because they're doing it, but I mean, maybe the next door neighbor in that house that's on the north side of that property.
Well, in any development, you've always got a plan of what you see it's going to be and how it's going to be used. In the real world, you try to put things that cycle against each other. If it's right, people use this in evenings or in weekends to get their boats or go up and deal with their boats or their RVs when businesses or doctors not in place. In the real world, some guys are going to come in during the middle of the week and get their boats. But this is not envisioned to be a high-traffic, high-flow. It's not a commercial park where you've got businesses back there accessing their warehouses 4 or 5 times a day. That's not what it's designed for. So to answer your question, it could happen, but I don't think they envision that as a real traffic issue.
I guess my concerns is the economy the way it is, and they don't have them things filled up, and somebody come there and want to fill them up with something that's really going to cause a hazardous problem or a problem that's going to be in the area. I mean, they're going to do it. They're not going to be just RVs and boats and stuff in there.
Any other comments or questions from commissioners? No further comments or questions? What's the wish of the commission? Remember that at this point we'll be voting as the planning commission, and then we'll take a second vote as the zoning commission.
I'd like to make a motion to deny based on the fact that it's not in accordance with our current master plan. It's an incompatible development that reduces the adjacent property value.
I have a motion to recommend denial to the parish council by Bob Nance,
Second.
seconded by Milton Cluott. Discussion.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Dalton?
I have concerns about what's going to happen down the road, what's going to be in there, because I understand the comments about it's going to be this and that used for this and that, but I see no way to enforce that. I could see where business people are in fact using it for commercial storage, and they go there on a regular basis and so forth, depending on what that is. If there was some way to ensure that this was strictly for like homeowners' use as a mini storage, that would be one kettle of fish, but I don't see any way to do that. So those are some of my concerns as to what's this actually going to be used for, that are totally out of the control of the developer and are subject to just the whims of the market and whatever people will want to go up and rent a space. So those are some of my concerns.
Any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Sadler?
I'd like to just amplify what Commissioner Dalton just said and couple it with the public comment. If it remained developed on an MU2, where essentially the same things that are being proposed could be done anyway as a SPUD, the big loss is the scrutiny of the public eye. And there's no one overseeing whether or not what would really, as you say, go in there. Mr. Dalton said it could be subject to the whims as it's already been of economics. We've seen that in other things already here tonight. And he said something also earlier that struck a chord with me. I also agree with. It's like if we were to even approve it this way, or if it went back to MU with a similar type of a concept, I just really can't buy into the 29 parking spaces at all as being adequate. I'm a senior citizen, and I visit my doctor at least once a year because I have to, and sometimes more than that when I don't want to. And parking is always a nightmare with not only their staff, the fact that they try to see to maximize, I shouldn't say that the motive, I don't want to imply it's bad in a way to maximize their profit or anything, but they see a lot of patients in a day, and it can be a nightmare. And even though most of the traffic will be occurring on the weekend on these boats, if that even happens, and RVs and so forth, one or two of them come through there, and you've got all kinds of other potential problems. So I have those concerns with this.
Any further discussion? If there's no further discussion at this time, we'll go ahead and vote. Mr. Dalton?
I vote to deny the recommendation.
You vote to recommend denial to the parish council? Okay.
It's almost like a double negative, but you get my drift.
Yeah. Mr. Barrow?
Ditto. Same thing, he said.
Yes or no?
Vote to recommend to deny.
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 Mr. Sadler?
Deny.
Mr. Esnard?
Deny.
Ms. Arizona? Motion passes. Now we'll vote as the zoning commission.
Same motion.
Okay, I have a motion to recommend denial to the parish council by Bob Nance,
I'll second it.
seconded by Howard Dalton. Any discussion? No discussion? We'll go ahead and vote. Mr. Dalton?
To deny.
To deny.
Deny.
Mr. Cluott?
Deny.
Mr. Sadler?
To deny, I know it's inappropriate to make a recommendation right now, but Mr. Chairman, motions should be stated in the affirmative, and we'll be having this problem that we're having on whether you're voting yes or no, and what does it mean? But I vote to deny.
Thank you. Mr. Esnard? Deny. Ms. Arizona Grading? Motion passes to deny. Item 7, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move.
Motion by Bob Nance, seconded by Milton Cluott. Any discussion or opposition? We're adjourned. We'll reconvene as the zoning commission in 10 minutes.